I'm Linda Morgan, 62 years old, and I've learned that sometimes love means standing your ground. Our family cabin has stood by the lake for 3 generations, a sanctuary of memories and traditions, at least until my son Jason met Sophia. When they told me I wasn't welcome at their wedding, something inside me broke. So I made a decision that would change everything between us. I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you believe family should mean respect, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how one moment of courage can restore your dignity. You won't believe what happened when that champagne glass shattered. Our family cabin sits on the north shore of Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire, nestled among tall pines that have witnessed our family history for decades. My grandparents purchased this piece of paradise in 1947, just after my grandfather returned from World War II. It wasn't much then, just a simple 2-bedroom structure with a stone fireplace and a small dock extending into the clear waters. I still remember my first visit as a 5-year-old, clutching my mother's hand as we walked the winding dirt path from the car to the cabin. The scent of pine and lake water, the crunch of needles underfoot. These sensations became the backdrop of my childhood summers. My grandparents had added a screened porch by then, where we'd gather for card games and evening meals, listening to loons call across the water as darkness fell. The cabin walls tell our story. Near the fireplace hangs a black and white photograph of my grandparents standing proudly on the dock, my grandfather holding up an impressive lake trout. Below it, a color photo from the 1970s shows my parents with my siblings and me, all of us in those terrible matching swimsuits that were fashionable then. And next to that, a picture of my husband Robert and me on our honeymoon, making our first visit to the cabin as a married couple. When Jason was born in 1985, bringing him to the cabin was one of our most anticipated moments. I still remember Robert carrying our 3-month-old son through the door, whispering to him, "This is your heritage, little man. One day, all of this will be part of your story, too." By age 5, Jason was learning to fish off the dock with his grandfather. By 7, he'd mastered swimming across the small cove in front of our property. Every summer brought new milestones. His first canoe paddle at 9, learning to water ski at 12, his first solo morning making pancakes for everyone at 14. There was nothing fancy about our cabin. The furniture was mismatched, some pieces original to my grandparents' time, others added through the years as needed. The kitchen remained charmingly outdated with its 1960s cabinets and the old gas stove that somehow made everything taste better. The squeaky screen door announced everyone's comings and goings with its distinctive spring sound that became as familiar as a family member's voice. Our collection of board games filled a cedar chest by the fireplace, many with missing pieces creatively replaced over the years. Bookshelves overflowed with dog-eared paperbacks left by generations of family members. On rainy days, the cabin filled with the sounds of Monopoly disputes, murder mystery reading sessions, and the delicious aroma of my mother's famous blueberry muffins made with berries we'd picked ourselves from the bushes that grew along the property line. Robert loved that cabin almost as much as I did. A city boy from Boston, he'd never experienced anything like the peace of our lake retreat before we met. He became the unofficial cabin historian, documenting our time there with photographs and journal entries. He taught Jason to respect the property, showing him how to replace loose boards on the dock, repair window screens, and properly clean and store the old aluminum canoe for winter. When Robert died unexpectedly 15 years ago from a stroke, the cabin became even more precious to me. Jason was in college then, and that first summer without Robert, we spent 2 healing weeks at the lake. We scattered some of Robert's ashes in the cove where he'd taught Jason to swim. We sat on the dock at sunset sharing stories, and sometimes just sitting in companionable silence. The cabin held us in our grief, its familiar walls a comfort when everything else felt uncertain. Legally, the cabin transferred fully to me after Robert's death, but I never thought of it as mine alone. It was our family legacy, a treasure to be preserved for future generations. As Jason grew into adulthood, graduated college, and established his career as an architect, I assumed one day he would bring his own family to love the cabin as we had. Over the years, I made necessary updates. A new roof, improved plumbing, solar panels to supplement the electricity. But I was careful to maintain the cabin's character, its soul. The original stone fireplace remained untouched. The collection of mismatched coffee mugs, each with its own story, still filled the open shelves beside the sink. The handmade quilt my grandmother stitched still covered the master bed, carefully washed and repaired as needed. When Jason turned 30, he was established in his career in Boston, busy with projects and building his reputation. But he still made time for our summer weeks at the cabin. He'd bring his laptop, but would end up closing it after a day or two, surrendering to the rhythm of lake life. "I think better here anyway," he'd say, sketching building ideas in the old hammock strung between two pines. Then 3 years ago, Jason met Sophia at a charity fundraiser in Boston. Their romance moved quickly. She was beautiful, sophisticated, a marketing executive for a luxury brand. The first time he mentioned bringing her to the cabin, I heard both excitement and nervousness in his voice. "Mom Sophia's used to well more upscale places, but I want her to see this part of my life. It's important." I remember thinking, if she loves my son, she'll appreciate what matters to him. How wrong I was. The first time I met Sophia was at an upscale restaurant in Boston. Jason had arranged dinner so we could get acquainted before their planned visit to the cabin the following month. She arrived 15 minutes late, air-kissing my cheek with a waft of expensive perfume. "Linda, finally. Jason talks about you constantly," she said, sliding gracefully into her chair. Everything about her was polished, her sleek dark hair falling in a perfect bob, her designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension, her manicure so flawless it looked unreal. Jason beamed at her pride, evident in his expression. I tried to warm to her, asking about her work, her family. Her answers were articulate but somehow distant, as if providing a well-rehearsed interview. When I mentioned our upcoming cabin weekend, her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Jason's shown me so many photos. It looks rustic." She said the last word like it was a medical condition. Still, I remained hopeful. Over dinner, Jason pulled out his phone to show Sophia pictures of last summer at the lake, him standing on the dock with a sunset behind him, the two of us laughing over breakfast on the porch. "This is the view from the bedroom window," he said enthusiastically. "You can see the sun rise over the water." Sophia glanced at the photos with polite disinterest. Those windows look quite small. Is there air conditioning?" Jason laughed. "No, but there's always a great cross breeze. And ceiling fans in the bedrooms now. Right, Mom?" "Yes," I nodded. "We added those about 10 years ago." Sophia's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. 10 years ago, and that was the last update. The warning bells were subtle but present. Still, I reminded myself that not everyone grows up appreciating simple pleasures. Perhaps the cabin would work its magic on her, as it had on Robert all those years ago. A month later, Jason brought Sophia for the long-promised weekend. I'd spent extra time preparing, fresh flowers on the tables, new plush towels in the bathroom, locally sourced food for our meals. I wanted her to feel welcome to see the cabin through Jason's eyes. From the moment they arrived, Sophia's displeasure was evident. She looked around with barely concealed dismay at the weathered floorboards, the mismatched furniture, the absence of modern technology. When a moth fluttered in through the screen door, she actually squealed. "Are there many bugs?" she asked, eyeing the porch ceiling as if expecting a swarm to descend. "It's nature," Jason said, putting an arm around her shoulders. "You get used to it." "I'm not sure I want to get used to insects," she muttered. That first evening, I prepared Robert's famous grilled trout with herbs from the small garden I maintained beside the cabin. We ate on the porch as always, the sunset painting the lake in shades of orange and pink. "This view almost makes up for the lack of amenities," Sophia commented, picking delicately at her fish. "Jason, darling, imagine what this place could be with proper renovation. Floor-to-ceiling windows to maximize the lake view, a gourmet kitchen, perhaps even a hot tub on an expanded deck." Jason looked uncomfortable, caught between his girlfriend's vision and the reality of the cabin he'd loved his entire life. "It's pretty perfect as is, Soph." She patted his hand condescendingly. "That's because you don't know any better. Once we're married, we could make this a showplace. Your architecture skills, my design sense. We could feature it in a magazine." The casual way she referenced marriage, something Jason hadn't mentioned to me, combined with her dismissal of our family treasure, sent a chill through me despite the warm evening. That weekend established a pattern. Sophia tolerated the cabin, but constantly suggested ways to improve it. Each comment felt like a small cut: her complaint about the musty old books, her disgust at finding a spider in the bathroom, her remark that the family photos were cluttering the aesthetic. By Sunday afternoon, I was relieved to see them go. As they packed the car, Sophia made one last comment that haunted me for months afterward. "Once we're married, we'll have to discuss what to do about this place. It has such potential if we gut it and start fresh." Over the next few months, Jason's behavior began to change. He canceled our traditional Thanksgiving gathering at the cabin, explaining that Sophia had already committed them to her family's celebration at some exclusive restaurant. Christmas brought a brief, hurried visit with Sophia, checking her watch throughout and making work calls from the porch. By spring, Jason had missed 2 seasonal opening weekends at the cabin, something that had never happened before. When he called to announce their engagement, after only 8 months of dating, I forced enthusiasm into my voice while feeling increasingly uneasy. "That's wonderful news, sweetheart. Sophia's a lucky woman." "We want a short engagement," he said, "probably this fall." "So soon." "Well, I have your grandmother's ring, the one she left specifically for your future wife. It's a beautiful piece, 3 generations of love in it." There was an awkward pause. "That's really thoughtful, Mom, but Sophia's already picked out a ring from Tiffany. Something about the design complementing her hand shape. I don't really understand these things." I swallowed my disappointment. "Of course, whatever makes you both happy." But happiness seemed increasingly absent from Jason's demeanor. During his increasingly rare visits, I noticed how he checked his phone, constantly texting Sophia his whereabouts. He seemed nervous about her approval, editing his own preferences to match hers. When I prepared his favorite blueberry pancakes one morning, he hesitated before taking a second helping. "Sophia's got me counting carbs," he explained with a forced laugh. The Jason I knew, independent, confident, joyful, was fading before my eyes. In his place was a man who seemed constantly anxious about pleasing someone who was never satisfied. Wedding planning proceeded without any input from me. When I offered to help, Jason said Sophia had everything under control. When I asked about the date, he was vague. When I mentioned hosting a small family gathering to celebrate their engagement, he said their schedule was too packed with events on Sophia's social calendar. I learned more about my son's wedding from his Facebook page than from our conversations. Photos appeared of venue tours at exclusive resorts, cake tastings at famous bakeries, Sophia posing with various designer wedding gowns. In none of these moments had I been included or even informed. But I held my peace, reminding myself that marriage changes things, that I needed to give them space to establish their own traditions. Still, a persistent worry nagged at me. If Sophia could so easily dismiss family traditions that mattered to Jason, what else would she change about the man I'd raised? The wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday in July, just 3 months before their planned October ceremony. The heavy cream envelope contained a formal invitation to the celebration of Sophia Elizabeth Harrington and Jason Robert Morgan, to be held at the Ocean View Resort in Newport, Rhode Island. I ran my fingers over the embossed lettering, trying to feel happy rather than excluded. Tucked behind the invitation was a small note card in flowing script. "Dear guests, your presence is our present. In lieu of traditional gifts, we have established a fund to help us begin our new life together. Contributions gratefully accepted." No mention of the family cabin we had always assumed would be Jason's wedding gift. No acknowledgement of the traditions we'd built together. Just a request for cash for a couple who, as far as I knew, were both doing extremely well financially. Later that same day, I received a call from Mike, Jason's best friend since college. "Mrs. M, have you heard the details about this destination wedding thing?" he asked without preamble. "They expect the wedding party to stay 3 nights at this resort. Do you know how much they're charging per night?" I admitted I didn't know anything about it. "It's insane," Mike continued. "Plus, we're supposed to rent specific tuxedos, attend multiple events. I'm looking at thousands of dollars to be in my best friend's wedding. I don't want to let Jason down, but I'm a public school teacher, not a hedge fund manager." Mike's words confirmed what I'd been sensing. Sophia was creating an event designed to impress with little regard for who could reasonably participate. I wondered if Jason realized how his oldest friends were being priced out of sharing his special day. The following weekend, I received a call from Jason. His voice sounded strained, lacking the warmth I'd always associated with my son. "Mom, I need to talk to you about the wedding." My heart lifted momentarily. Perhaps he was finally going to include me in some aspect of the planning. "Of course, honey. What can I help with?" "Well, it's about the guest list." He paused uncomfortably. "Sophia and I have been going through everything trying to keep numbers manageable for the venue." Something in his tone sent a chill through me. "I understand. These things can get complicated." "The thing is, Mom," his voice trailed off. Then he seemed to steel himself. "Sophia feels that having you at the wedding might be uncomfortable for everyone." For a moment, I couldn't process what he was saying. "I don't understand." "It's just that, well, you and Sophia have different values, different ideas about our future. She thinks your presence might cast a shadow on her special day." I sat down heavily on the kitchen chair, gripping the phone. "Jason, are you telling me I'm not invited to my only child's wedding?" Before he could answer, I heard Sophia's voice in the background, then the sound of the phone changing hands. "Linda, I think it's better if I explain." Sophia's controlled voice came through the line. "Jason and I are creating a very specific atmosphere for our celebration. Your outdated values and simple tastes don't really align with our elegant vision." I felt as if I'd been slapped. "My outdated values. Let's be honest." She continued, her voice coolly reasonable. "You've never approved of me, never embraced my ideas for modernizing your family traditions. The cabin situation especially, your resistance to necessary improvements shows how stuck in the past you are." "The cabin has been in our family for generations," I said, finding my voice. "It's not about being stuck in the past, it's about honoring what came before us." "That's exactly what I mean." Sophia sighed as if explaining something to a child. "Our wedding is about looking forward, not backward. Having you there disapproving and judging would only create tension. I'm sure you can understand that a bride deserves perfect happiness on her wedding day." I heard Jason mumble something in the background. "Oh, and Jason wants you to know we can celebrate with you separately sometime after the honeymoon, something small and appropriate to your comfort level." The dismissal was so complete, so callous, that for a moment I couldn't breathe. "Let me speak to my son," I finally managed. "He's actually stepping into the shower before our dinner reservation," Sophia replied smoothly. "But I'll tell him you send your love and understanding." After the call ended, I sat in stunned silence, excluded from my only child's wedding, dismissed as an embarrassment, too simple, too outdated to be included in their elegant vision. I called my sister Grace immediately, my voice breaking as I explained what had happened. "That manipulative little witch," Grace exclaimed, "and Jason just went along with this. He barely spoke," I admitted. "It was like he couldn't find his voice." "This isn't about different values or wedding aesthetics," Grace said firmly. "This is about Sophia isolating Jason from his family. It's a classic control tactic." I knew she was right, but acknowledging it only deepened my pain. My son, my kind, confident son, had become someone who would allow his mother to be excluded from the most important day of his life. That evening, unable to sleep, I logged onto Facebook, something I rarely did. A notification showed that Sophia had tagged Jason in several posts. Curiosity overcoming my better judgment, I clicked through. What I found felt like another blow. Sophia had created multiple Pinterest boards detailing her plans for the lake house renovation, her rebranding of our family cabin. The images showed gutted interiors, walls removed, the stone fireplace replaced with something sleek and modern, the cozy bedrooms transformed into minimalist spaces that bore no resemblance to the warm refuge my family had loved for generations. Comments from her friends praised her vision for transforming this dated property. One post mentioned potential rental income once renovations are complete. Lakefront properties can bring in $5,000 plus weekly in peak season. So that was her plan, not just to change our family cabin, but to commercialize it, to turn our sanctuary of memories into a profit-generating rental property. And based on Jason's likes and supportive comments, he had agreed to this plan, or been convinced to go along with it. I closed my laptop, tears streaming down my face. It wasn't just about missing the wedding anymore. It was about watching everything I valued being systematically dismantled by someone who saw no worth in the things that had given our family meaning for generations. That night, sleep eluded me entirely. I sat in my living room until dawn, a cup of tea growing cold beside me, thinking about what had happened and what I needed to do. By morning, I had reached a painful clarity. I loved my son unconditionally, but I had failed him by not establishing boundaries with Sophia earlier. Now it wasn't just about me. It was about protecting a legacy that had been entrusted to my care. I pulled out the file box from my office, locating the folder labeled Cabin Documents. Inside were the deed insurance papers, tax records, and maintenance logs I'd kept meticulously since Robert's death. Most importantly, there was the will that had transferred ownership solely to me after he passed away. The cabin was legally mine. I had always thought of it as belonging to our family collectively, a treasure to be shared. But now I needed to consider what that really meant. I called Arthur Jennings, our family lawyer, who had handled Robert's estate and had helped my parents with their affairs before that. His secretary put me through immediately. "Linda, how are you? It's been too long." Arthur's familiar voice was comforting. "Not well, I'm afraid." I admitted explaining the situation with Jason, Sophia, and their plans for the cabin. "I'm so sorry to hear this," Arthur said when I finished. "That kind of exclusion is cruel, especially from your only child." "Arthur, I need to know exactly where I stand legally with the cabin. Is it completely in my name?" "Absolutely," he confirmed. "Robert's will left it solely to you with the understanding that you'd eventually pass it to Jason. But there's no legal obligation or timeline for that transfer, so I could change the ownership structure if needed. I asked a plan forming in my mind. You have complete authority to do whatever you wish with the property," Arthur assured me. "May I ask what you're considering?" I explained my thoughts, and Arthur listened carefully. "It's certainly possible," he said when I'd finished. "We could have the documents prepared within a week. But Linda, have you considered how this might permanently affect your relationship with Jason?" "I've thought of little else," I admitted. "But I need to ask myself, what kind of relationship do we have if he allows his mother to be excluded from his wedding, if he stands by while Sophia plans to dismantle a place that holds our family history?" After our call, I sat looking at my phone at the text that had come in from Jason the previous week. "Sophia and I are planning to spend the week after the wedding at the cabin. Could you make sure it's opened up and the fridge stocked? We'll need the place to ourselves. S wants peace and quiet to work on renovation plans." Not even a conversation about their intentions, just an assumption that I would prepare my own home for them to begin dismantling it. I called Grace again, needing her perspective. "You know I'll support whatever you decide," she said after I outlined my plan. "But are you prepared for the fallout Jason might not forgive you?" "I know," I said, my voice breaking. "But right now I don't recognize the son I raised. The Jason I know would never treat anyone this way, let alone his mother." "People can be blinded by manipulation," Grace said gently, "especially when it comes from someone they love." "I keep hoping he'll wake up and see what's happening," I admitted. "Maybe this will be the wake-up call he needs." Over the next few days, I moved forward with my plan. I met with Arthur to sign the necessary paperwork. I visited the cabin alone, taking photographs of every room, every detail that held meaning. I carefully collected the most precious family mementos. The photo albums, my grandfather's fishing tackle box, the set of carved wooden loons my father had made. I wasn't removing these things permanently. I was safeguarding them until I knew their future was secure. On my last evening there, I sat on the dock as the sun set, just as I had hundreds of times before. I remembered Robert and I sitting in these same chairs, watching Jason learn to swim in the cove. I remembered my father teaching me to paddle a canoe, my mother calling us all in for dinner from this same spot. The cabin had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical. It had been our constant through celebrations and sorrows. I couldn't bear the thought of it being gutted, its soul removed, for the sake of modern aesthetics and rental income. As darkness fell over the lake, I made my final decision. It wasn't about punishing Jason or even Sophia. It was about preserving something precious, something that deserved protection, and perhaps someday they would understand. 3 days before the wedding, I learned from Mike that a lavish rehearsal dinner was planned at Le Ciel, the most expensive restaurant in Newport. Originally, I had planned to wait until after the wedding to execute my plan, but something shifted in me when I realized I wouldn't even be allowed to witness my son's marriage. I arrived at Le Ciel at 8:15 p.m., knowing from Mike that dinner was scheduled for 7:30. I wore a simple but elegant navy dress, nothing flashy, nothing that could be criticized as inappropriate. My hair was freshly styled, my makeup subtle. I wanted to present myself with dignity. The maitre d' recognized the Morgan name when I inquired about the rehearsal dinner, assuming I was a late-arriving guest. He directed me to a private room at the back of the restaurant where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Atlantic Ocean. I paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. Crystal chandeliers illuminated a long table adorned with elaborate floral arrangements. About 30 people were seated enjoying what appeared to be the main course. At the head of the table sat Sophia, resplendent in a white designer dress, her hand resting possessively on Jason's arm as she laughed at something her father had said. No one noticed me at first. Then Sophia's mother, a woman I'd met only once, briefly glanced up. Her expression of shock alerted Sophia, who turned to see what had caused the reaction. The smile froze on her face. "Linda," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "What a surprise." All eyes turned to me. Jason looked stunned, his face paling as he half rose from his chair. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I stepped forward, keeping my voice calm and steady. "I apologize for interrupting your dinner. I won't stay long, but there's something important I need to share with you both." Sophia's perfectly manicured hand tightened on Jason's arm, pulling him back into his seat. "We're in the middle of a private event," she said, her tone icy. "Whatever it is can surely wait until after the wedding. Oh, wait," she added with false concern. "You won't be joining us for that, will you?" Several guests shifted uncomfortably. Clearly not everyone had been informed of my exclusion. "Actually, this concerns your post-wedding plans," I replied evenly. "I understand you're planning to spend the week after your honeymoon at the lake cabin." "That's right," Jason said, finding his voice. "We mentioned that to you." "You did," I acknowledged. "And normally I'd be happy to have you both enjoy the cabin. But given the circumstances and what I've discovered about your plans for the property, I felt I should deliver this in person." From my purse, I withdrew an envelope bearing the logo of Arthur's law firm. "What's that?" Sophia asked sharply. "Documentation of some changes I've made regarding the cabin's ownership," I explained. "I've transferred the property into a family trust with specific provisions for its use and maintenance." Jason frowned, confusion evident on his face. "What does that mean exactly?" I took a deep breath. "It means the cabin can never be significantly altered from its current structure. It means no commercial use is permitted, no rentals, no profit-generating activities. It means the property remains in the Morgan family, in perpetuity, preserved as the legacy my grandparents intended." Sophia stared at me, comprehension dawning in her eyes. The champagne glass she'd been holding slipped from her fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. "You can't do that," she said, her voice rising. "That property is Jason's inheritance. It was always meant to be," I agreed. "And it still is, in a sense. Jason will serve as co-trustee with me and eventually with his own children should he have them. But the cabin itself, its character, its purpose as a family gathering place, that's protected now." I turned to my son, whose expression had shifted from confusion to a dawning understanding. "Jason, I'd never keep you from the cabin. It's your heritage, your history. But I couldn't stand by and watch it be destroyed in the name of profit or modernization." "This is about the wedding invitation, isn't it?" Sophia snapped. "You're punishing us because we wanted one day that wasn't about your outdated sentimentality." "No, Sophia," I said quietly. "This is about respecting what came before us. It's about understanding that some things have value beyond their market potential. The cabin has sheltered 5 generations of our family through celebrations and sorrows. I'm simply ensuring it can do the same for future generations." Jason had remained silent, his eyes fixed on the envelope in my hand. "Can I see that?" he finally asked. I passed him the document. As he read, something shifted in his expression, a recognition, perhaps, of what had almost been lost. Sophia's father, a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit, cleared his throat. Perhaps we should continue this discussion in private. There's no need, I said, stepping back toward the door. I've said what I came to say. Congratulations on your wedding. I truly wish you both happiness. As I turned to leave, Jason stood suddenly. Mom, wait. But Sophia pulled him back down. Let her go, Jason. We'll figure this out after the wedding. My father knows excellent property attorneys. I heard her father murmur something about trusts being complicated legal structures, but potentially contestable. I walked out with my head high, neither hurrying nor dawdling. The maitre d' caught my eye as I passed a hint of admiration in his expression. Perhaps he'd witnessed similar scenes of family discord in his elegant establishment. Outside, the October air was brisk off the ocean. I took several deep breaths, steadying myself after the confrontation. What I'd done couldn't be undone. For better or worse, I had taken a stand to protect something precious. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Mike. Don't know what just happened, but it was epic. Sophia's having a meltdown. Jason looks like he's actually thinking for the first time in months. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to my hotel, surprisingly calm, despite the emotional confrontation. I had stood my ground. I had protected a family legacy. And perhaps, just perhaps, I had created a small crack in the facade Sophia had constructed around my son. The wedding proceeded without me, of course. I spent that Saturday at home, trying not to imagine what was happening in Newport. Grace called several times to check on me, but I assured her I was fine. In truth, I fluctuated between certainty that I'd done the right thing and crushing doubt about potentially destroying my relationship with my only child. Mike sent occasional updates. The ceremony was elaborate and picture-perfect, though he noted Jason seemed distracted. The reception featured a 5-course gourmet meal, champagne fountains, and a fireworks display over the ocean. Everything was designed to impress, to create a spectacle that would be the envy of Sophia's social circle. But something's off, Mike texted late that night. S keeps whispering intensely to Jay whenever they're alone. He looks miserable half the time. I thanked Mike for the updates but asked him to stop. The details were only making the exclusion more painful. The following week brought what I'd been dreading, the legal response. An attorney representing Sophia's father contacted Arthur questioning the validity of the trust and suggesting they might contest it. Arthur assured me the documentation was solid, the trust properly established. They're hoping to intimidate you, he explained, but legally, your position is quite strong. Jason called 3 days after returning from his honeymoon, his voice tight with controlled anger. Why would you do this, Mom, right before our wedding? I'm sorry for the timing, I said sincerely, but I couldn't stand by while plans were made to essentially destroy our family legacy. Renovations aren't destruction, he countered. The cabin needs updating. Sophia just wants to make it more comfortable, more suited to our lifestyle. Jason, I said gently. I saw Sophia's Pinterest boards. The plans went far beyond updating. The entire character of the place would be lost. That's dramatic, he scoffed, but with less conviction. And the rental plans converting our family retreat into a commercial property. A pause. It just makes financial sense. We'd still use it ourselves sometimes. The cabin was never meant to be a financial investment, I reminded him. It was meant to be a place where family bonds are strengthened, where memories are made. Your grandfather didn't buy it to generate income. He bought it to create a sanctuary for the people he loved. Times change, Mom. Not everything has to stay frozen in the past like some museum. No, but some things deserve to be preserved. Not unchanged. The cabin has evolved over the years. We've added amenities, made repairs, adapted to new needs. But we've done it with respect for what came before. Another silence then. Sophia's furious. Her father's talking about legal action. I know, but the trust is legally sound. Was it worth it? He asked suddenly. Potentially destroying our relationship over a building. The question struck me like a physical blow. Our relationship was already damaged, Jason, when you allowed me to be excluded from your wedding, when you stood silent while Sophia dismissed everything I value as outdated and embarrassing, when you began to treat our family history as something to be erased rather than honored. That's not fair, he protested, but weakly. Perhaps not. I'm sure there are things I could have handled better. But tell me honestly, if I had simply handed over the keys and allowed everything to proceed as Sophia planned, what role would I have in your lives going forward? An occasional obligatory visit, holidays when Sophia's preferred options weren't available. He didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was subdued. I need to think about all this. I need some time. I understand, I said. I love you, Jason. That has never changed and never will. When you're ready to talk, really talk, I'll be here. After we hung up, I felt drained but somehow lighter. For the first time since this ordeal began, I'd spoken my complete truth without filtering it through fear of his reaction. Whatever came next, I had honored both my son and myself by being honest. The weeks that followed were difficult. Sophia launched what Grace called a social media offensive, posting thinly veiled references to toxic family members and controlling mothers who can't let go. Her friends commented with supportive outrage, vilifying the unnamed monster-in-law who had apparently ruined their perfect plans. I stayed away from social media, entirely focusing instead on rebuilding my own life. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected, joined a community gardening project, and started swimming 3 times a week at the local YMCA. I visited the cabin alone, taking comfort in its familiar embrace, reaffirming my commitment to preserving its essence. Arthur called in mid-November to report that Sophia's father's legal threats had fizzled out. Their attorney advised them the trust is virtually bulletproof, he explained. They'd waste a lot of money on a losing battle. 3 months after the wedding, I was pulling weeds in my front garden when a familiar car pulled into the driveway. Jason sat behind the wheel for several long moments before finally emerging. He looked tired with dark circles under his eyes and a tension in his shoulders I hadn't seen before. "Can we talk?" he asked simply. I nodded, leading him inside to the kitchen where I poured us both iced tea, a habit from his childhood visits after school. "How are you?" I asked, genuinely concerned by his exhausted appearance. "Honestly, not great." He stared into his glass. "Things with Sophia, they're complicated." "Marriage can be," I acknowledged, "especially in the early months. It's more than adjustment issues." He looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "Mike showed me the text you sent before the wedding, the one explaining why you wouldn't be there." I stayed silent, waiting. "Sophia told me you never responded, that you just refused the invitation out of spite." He ran a hand through his hair. "She kept your letter too, the one you mailed. I never saw it until Mike mentioned it." "I'm sorry, Jason. I never wanted to come between you and Sophia. I know that now." He took a deep breath. "The cabin situation made me start noticing other things. How Sophia reacts when she doesn't get her way. How she's isolated me from most of my friends. How she rewrites events to make herself the victim." My heart ached for him. That must be difficult to recognize. "Mike says she's been doing it all along, that all my friends saw it but didn't know how to tell me." He gave a bitter laugh. "Apparently being an architect doesn't make me good at seeing the structural flaws in my own relationship. We're all blind sometimes to the people we love," I said gently. Jason nodded slowly. "I owe you an apology, Mom. A big one. I let Sophia push you out of my wedding, out of my life. I stood by while she dismissed everything that matters to our family. I convinced myself it was about modern versus traditional values, not about respect and common decency." Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you for saying that." "I don't know what happens next," he admitted, "with Sophia with us, but I do know I don't want to lose my mother because I couldn't stand up for what's right." I reached across the table and took his hand. "You won't lose me, ever, but I need to know you'll respect my boundaries going forward. I won't be dismissed or manipulated, not even for your sake." "That's fair," he agreed. "More than fair, considering everything." We talked for hours that afternoon, more openly than we had in years. Jason shared his growing concerns about Sophia's controlling behavior, her constant dissatisfaction, her isolation tactics. I mostly listened, offering perspective, only when asked, careful not to seem like I was saying, "I told you so." As he was leaving, Jason asked, "Would it be okay if I came up to the cabin next weekend alone? I need some time to think, and that's always been the best place for that." "Of course," I said, a warmth spreading through me at the request. "The cabin has always been a place for healing. I think your grandfather would be pleased to know it's still serving that purpose." Jason hugged me tightly before he left the first real embrace we'd shared in over a year. "Thanks for protecting it, Mom. I didn't understand at the time, but I do now." I watched him drive away, hope cautiously blooming in my heart. Whatever happened with his marriage, whatever challenges lay ahead, the connection between us was beginning to mend, and the cabin would remain what it had always been, a sanctuary for our family, a keeper of our history, a witness to our journey. 1 year after the confrontation at Le Ciel, so much has changed in ways I never could have predicted. The cabin still stands, its character intact, its soul preserved. But the people who love it have transformed through painful growth and hard-won wisdom. Jason and Sophia entered marriage counseling 2 months after our reconciliation. He approached it with genuine hope that they could address their issues and build a healthier relationship. But as he later told me, "You can't fix a problem if only one person acknowledges it exists." After 3 months of therapy during a session where the counselor gently suggested Sophia might benefit from individual work on control issues, she stormed out, declaring the therapist obviously biased and unprofessional. She refused to return. Their separation came shortly after, initiated by Jason, after discovering Sophia had been monitoring his emails and texts, confronting friends who spent time with him without her knowledge. The divorce proceedings were contentious, but mercifully quick, finalized 8 months after the wedding. Throughout this difficult period, I maintained careful boundaries. I supported Jason emotionally without criticizing Sophia directly, allowing him to reach his own conclusions and make his own decisions. When he occasionally stayed at my house during the worst of the separation, I gave him space to process his feelings without inserting my opinions. The cabin became his refuge during those turbulent months. He spent weekends there alone, reconnecting with the peace it had always offered him. Sometimes he invited Mike or other old friends, rebuilding relationships that had been damaged during his time with Sophia. As for me, this year brought unexpected personal growth. The stand I took about the cabin, perhaps the first time I'd truly asserted my own boundaries in decades, sparked something in me. I realized how much of my identity had been wrapped up in being Jason's mother, in prioritizing his needs above my own. With encouragement from Grace and newfound confidence, I expanded my world. I joined a book club that evolved into a close-knit group of friends. I volunteered teaching ESL classes at the community center, finding satisfaction in helping others find their voices. I even began dating again, cautiously at first, then with growing enthusiasm when I met Richard, a kind widower who teaches history at the local college. Richard and I are taking things slowly, enjoying the simple pleasure of companionship without rushing toward definitions or commitments. He has his own grown children and understands the delicate balance of building a new relationship while honoring established family bonds. This past summer brought a full-circle moment when Jason suggested we host a family weekend at the cabin. Family now included Grace and her husband, my cousin Eleanor from Chicago, Richard, and several of Jason's closest friends who had stood by him through the divorce. As we gathered on the porch that first evening, the sunset painting the lake gold and crimson, Jason raised his glass. "To the cabin," he said, "and to the woman who saved it. Mom, I don't think I fully understood what this place meant until I almost lost it. And you. Thank you for having the courage to protect what matters." The cabin looks much as it always has, with a few thoughtful updates. Jason used his architectural skills to reinforce the dock and repair some structural issues with the roof. We added solar panels that power new energy-efficient appliances while maintaining the rustic aesthetic. The original stone fireplace remains the heart of the main room, surrounded by the mismatched furniture that tells our family story. The trust I established ensures the cabin will remain in our family for generations to come. Jason has embraced his role as co-trustee, taking an active interest in preservation while allowing for sensible modernization. We've documented the cabin's history in a leather-bound book that sits on the coffee table filled with photographs and stories dating back to my grandparents' time. Most importantly, the cabin continues to serve its original purpose, creating space for family bonds to strengthen, for memories to form, for connections to deepen. This summer, Jason brought a woman named Claire to the cabin for the first time. Watching her genuine delight in the simple pleasures of lake life, morning swims, campfire conversations, stargazing from the dock, I felt a quiet hope for my son's future. What I've learned through this journey is that standing up for yourself doesn't mean losing the people you love. Sometimes it's the only way to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than convenience or obligation. I've learned that preserving what matters sometimes requires difficult choices and uncomfortable confrontations. And I've learned that family legacy isn't just about physical places or objects. It's about the values we demonstrate, the boundaries we establish, and the love we express, even in challenging circumstances. If you're facing a situation where someone is dismissing what matters to you, where your boundaries are being crossed, where your history is being devalued, I hope my story gives you courage. Standing your ground doesn't make you difficult or unreasonable. It makes you someone who honors yourself and the generations who came before you. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect something important to your family? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to assert your worth and protect what matters most. Thank you for being part of this journey with me.